Welcome to our latest roundtable. My name is Ann Vasquez, the CEO of EdSource. We've heard about teacher shortages for years. Across the country and certainly here in California, it's hard to keep up with the constant turnover. Nearly half of all new teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years. Teachers of color are the most likely to leave. We know that turnover has a direct impact on student success. As we continue to deal with the effects on education as a result of the pandemic, what can be done to support new teachers? How can teacher preparation and mentorship stem the outflow? Today, we'll explore those questions and many more. And lastly, EdSource would not be able to bring us all together for these monthly roundtables if it weren't for the support of our funders. A big thank you to the Gates Foundation today for making today's roundtable possible. Now for our introductions. First, I'd like to welcome to our panel Tommy Chang, CEO of the New Teacher Center, a national nonprofit dedicated to improving educator effectiveness. With more than 25 years of education experience and leadership, he has served as superintendent of Boston Public Schools and instructional superintendent at LA Unified. Please also welcome Jenna Hewitt-King, high school English teacher at San Leandro High School and a current Teach Plus California Senior Policy Fellow. Next, I'd like to introduce Gabrielle Wilson, who teaches English, music, and French in Palo Alto Unified. I'd also like to give a special welcome to Julie Sheldon, who is the coordinator of the Walnut Valley Induction Consortium, which supports new teachers and administrators in 9 districts in Los Angeles County. Please also welcome John Brazelton, who has been teaching for 30 years and currently is teaching science at Newport Harbor High School in Newport Mesa Unified. Our moderator today is EdSource reporter Diana Lambert. Welcome everyone in the audience and to those working behind the scenes today. Diana, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Tommy, the first question is for you. I just want to know why you think so many teachers leave in the first 5 years.
Well, I don't think we're surprised. There's many reasons. I recently encountered the results of a Ed Week survey of teachers across the country, and currently 85% of teachers are considering a job change. It's a stunning number. According to their survey, the top 2 reasons: pay, workload. And there are other reasons, including lack of support. We all know teachers are tired, they're burnt out, they're being asked to do more things than they've ever been done in challenging conditions. For example, teachers are being asked to handle substituting. Like my friends who are teachers in their classrooms, they don't have a prep period right now. They are subbing every single period. And the social emotional challenges since the pandemic have only gone greater. States where there's high stakes testing, we work with states all across the country. Teachers are seeing a major disconnect with those sort of traditional assessments and what students really need to know now to be prepared for life after school. And that gap, that disconnect is just getting more obvious. And then that's on top of the culture wars, the pulling back of teacher autonomy. I'll just end with one more comment. Like, this crisis is not new. It was always at our doorstep. The last 33 years have made it even more challenging. But in 2019, before the pandemic, the Economic Policy Institute, they estimated that by 2024, which is next year, we're going to need 300,000 teachers to fill the demand for educators. So factors have worsened in the last 2 years, but we've known about these problems.
Well, teachers of color are leaving at even a higher pace. Can you talk about why that's happening?
Is that directed toward me or just
you or anyone?
Yeah. I will say the wraparound support for teachers, especially new teachers, is even more important for teachers of color. For so many teachers of color, they are the 1 or 2 teachers in a building. And the sort of interconnected supports needed at a district level is really important.
If I could add, I would just, I want to amplify this aspect of burnout for teachers and particularly new teachers. The unfortunate reality is that because of seniority and comfort of teachers who have been in their positions for a long time, oftentimes new teachers are burdened with picking up the jobs of joining extra committees, subbing, like Tommy mentioned, volunteering to cover events that need teacher supervision, all of these things that are really important for school culture and climate and community that new teachers who have energy and are excited about their new places don't want to miss out on, but also feel like they have to carry the burden of doing all of those extra things. I can't count even how many committees I've been on where I show up and it's the same 5 teachers who are on every single committee, who are the same folks. And most of us are oftentimes younger or newer to teaching, right? And so I think it's burnout because of the work that we're doing in general, which is overwhelming with the class sizes right now, right? And all of the other things we have to juggle, but specifically burnout for new teachers is all of these extra things that we have to carry as well.
So what can district leaders do to encourage new teachers to stay?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. For me, the biggest thing that allowed me to stay, I'm just past the cusp of this 5-year mark. I'm in year 6, and it was consistent support. And I think support can't work unless it's consistent. My induction coach met with me every Tuesday, no matter what. If she was out sick, she called me on Tuesday and we talked from her home, right? And she observed me every 2 weeks, no matter what. The support that I got was consistent, and that doesn't happen everywhere for most new teachers. And I think that consistency is what really does it for making teachers feel like they know someone is always going to be there. John, did you want to add to that?
I wanted more to piggyback on Jenna's earlier comment about burnout. My department of 13 science teachers, we have two newbies, first-year teachers this year, and me as the old guy in the department, I've had to make it a point to constantly be telling them that it's okay to say no. That yes, you're overwhelmed with all of the preps that you have, which very often for that new teacher, it's the less desirable classes. And we in our department, we've made it a policy to share that among the old and the young, the new and the seasoned, so that those newbies don't feel as put upon. And then we also encourage them, yes, you want to be active in the school culture, but it's also okay to say no if you're feeling overwhelmed. Because we want those new teachers to stick with us. Most of the teachers in our department are long time. We have very little turnover in our department. And I think there's a reason for that. And it's that support, that constant support, as Jenna was saying, that's so important, not just intermittent, but all the time, constantly having other members of the department and the faculty and the administration checking in on them and listening to them and helping them work through the challenges that they're having, which, as Tommy mentioned, one of them can't really be addressed by their coworkers or admin, and that's the pay. And I know that of our 4 newest teachers, 3 of them could only afford to stay at our school by continuing to live at home because their starting teacher pay was not enough to afford rent in our community, which is shameful. To be honest, and that's something that we can't control directly, but definitely needs to be addressed.
I would love to add and just absolutely confirm the things that I see with new teachers that both John and Jenna mentioned, and I especially appreciate, Jenna, that you mentioned that consistent support from your coach, from your mentor. I think that's really key, but it has to be a system-wide support. It really does. It needs to be where the new teacher is brought into the culture of the school and the district, and that there are given, I like to say that your mentor is the brightest star in the sky, but not the only one. It is an entire universe of support, of people to collaborate with, who are in your grade level or in your subject area or teaching context. It's really important that administration supports and the the idea that new teachers are given the hardest assignments is so wrong. If there's truly systematic support, then those teachers will be allowed to focus on their classroom, on their students, and learning their craft, and not being asked to take on those additional roles of being on curriculum committees or coaching teams, or taking on those additional duties. And so I think it also has to be a system where the veteran teachers are supportive of the new teachers, not just those mentors. So it really has to be system-wide, and also that support needs to be something that is built into the district vision and culture. When I've seen it done best and they really retain their teachers, it's because it's like a whole district embrace of these employees, and that all of the experts in the district help support that candidate, not just the mentor or the coach.
Really, affirming what you just said, it has to be a coherent system of support. There is a great example in a district that the New Teacher Center works with. We work with Oakland Unified School District. The teacher retention surveys show that feedback and coaching, specifically by their site administrators, is having the most positive impact on their practice. And so the school district, actually the teacher induction team, meets with individual school sites to create an annual plan for how they will support new teachers. And so it's a very individualized way of supporting each school in supporting their teachers. And I think that's definitely a bright spot. One other thing I would call out, especially for new teachers of color, they cannot be the only advocates for students of color, a comment about teachers of color, new teachers of color. They cannot be the only advocates for students of color. They cannot be the only advocates for multilingual learners, because often they feel the pressure. And I do think Jana was hinting at this, right? They feel the pressure to be the sole advocates because a lot of teachers of color are the younger staff. And that's got to be supported. It has to be a school-wide, district-wide effort to support all kids.
So everyone on this panel has been a teacher or is a teacher. What was your biggest hurdle as a new teacher? Anyone want to chime in?
As a new teacher, I found it odd that structurally my teacher prep program and the CTC requirements sort of gave out this guideline, a mandate for teachers to, new teachers to teach as interns. So you're working full-time and yet you're a full-time student. You know, you're in a master's program at the same time. So you've got a conflict right there. So oftentimes my school schedule at Mills, I was in Oakland where my first internship job was, OUSD. So sometimes there was a direct conflict and there was no one to talk to. And both of my mentors, I didn't feel seen or heard by. And it was during a pandemic. So, so there was a lot of around that. So new teachers of color, I think for me anyway, I found it even more difficult, to navigate those spaces. I felt it even more challenging, put it that way. And then with housing insecurity in the Bay Area, the students felt it as well as teachers, including myself. Like I wouldn't dare think about moving. I had a good situation. I have a good situation. And so the internship that I got, I just took it. And even though I didn't agree with it and I asked for something different, it was like, absolutely not. Like you're going to go to the school with the worst numbers. That is going to be most challenging. And when I got there, it was the least diverse place I've ever worked. And I looked up the statistics and it looks like the teaching professional K through 12 public school there. You probably know the answer to that. You all probably know the answer to that. So there needs to be a lot of structural changes around getting, recruiting and retaining more more teachers of color.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think another barrier right away. Thank you, Gabrielle, for saying that. I also went to Mills, and I talk a lot about how overwhelming the workload is when you're doing all of your coursework while you're interning or student teaching, while you're having to prep for these exams and tests that everyone tells you are like the hardest possible thing to do, right? The narrative around it was called PACT when I did it. I think it's EdTPA now, right? Like the narrative is that people know these are like ridiculously difficult things to do. And it's been normalized that you're like losing sleep and stressed and overwhelmed by all of your work. And people are like, that's okay. It's part of getting your credential. And to me, like that doesn't feel like a system that I would want to continue in if I didn't know and believe that I wanted and needed to be a teacher, right? And so I think when we talk about teacher prep programs, it's really important to consider like what is the workload that we're giving to these folks and what parts of those things are actually going to stick. I wrote in a commentary recently, I took an EL language learning course at Mills. But when I actually got placed in an ELD class, I didn't remember anything from that class because it was one of 7 classes I took and in the middle of doing my PACT, right? And so how meaningful is this like overwhelming year or 2 years of teacher prep if we're not giving opportunity for teachers to think about like what really happens in the classroom. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass to you, John, is the other assessments that teachers have to take. I didn't pass the initial assessments and I had to pay 3 times to take the same assessment. And I was working through all of that and thankfully could afford to do that. But a lot of people can't. And so I think we really need to question the value of these assessments, whether or not they are the true indicator of whether or not a teacher is prepared to be in the classroom.
Yeah, to add to what Jenna was saying, I recall back in the dark ages when I student taught, all of the stress of effectively working full time for free and paying to be a student on top of that. So I was actually offered a temp contract for an opening in the district where I was student teaching. And of course I jumped on it because, hey, why would I work for free when I can go and get paid doing this? And it amped the stress level even higher. But it's nothing compared to what I see the student teachers that I have been master teacher mentor for in the last decade, all of the extra hoops that have to be jumped through for the state of California to get their preliminary and their clear credential, all while effectively working for full time for free, paying to be a student at the same time and doing the EdTPA and all of the other work that they have on top of that. And I think back to what I went through and seeing this new crop of future teachers doing even more. And I first of all, a tip of the hat to them for making it through and doing it. But on the flip side, I think it's totally unnecessary because so little of what I got out of my education classes was applicable in the classroom and actually made me a better teacher. I think what would have helped would have been, rather than all of those ed classes, actually having more time in the classroom with a master teacher. Basically what it sounds like the new paradigm of residency is moving toward, which I find very encouraging, but there's still a lot that needs to be done to make it more survivable and less chaotic and stressful for these new teachers coming in, which I think is one of the primary reasons for burnout.
Can we build on what John and Jen have been talking about? We're getting lots of questions from the audience, which I appreciate. One of them was speaks to the licensing and the credentialing and how can California, I don't want to say lower the barriers, but change the barriers for teachers while keeping a high bar when it comes to quality, looking at solutions. Yes. And John, I think what you were speaking to is, an example of that.
Yeah, so I think Boston and New York have the right idea. They just flat out got rid of EdTPA. I think there are different ways to show understanding and competency although I passed all my substantive tests, the EdTPA was really particularly challenging during COVID. A lot of students didn't want to be filmed. Their parents had privacy concern. They already have emotions that are running super high. And so it's like, oh, so now you want to bring a camera in and videotape us and send it to your school and to the state and maybe Stanford. And it was just too much. I had one student get permission from home to be on camera. So we had to do the whole dance about blacking students out. And it's just a train wreck. So that's where I am right now. I know a lot of my colleagues, they were able to get a preliminary credential, like a preliminary, because of the pandemic and the disruption it caused. And the CTC, they made an exception for some. If you were as far along as a certain point as you needed to be in order to receive that. And they took advantage of them, some of them. But I didn't, because I felt really committed to the special ed students, and they were mostly students of color. And so I just felt like I was not going to rush. If anything, I was going to switch from single subject ELA to special ed. Anyway, long story short is EdTPA is very expensive. It's very difficult to do. I commute from Berkeley to Palo Alto. I'm a resident sub. It's just too much. And I feel like there's a better way for me to show understanding. I'm not a video maven. I'm not very technical around those things. So it's expensive. It's a lot. And I feel like it doesn't even show. I don't really know what they're looking for. It's just too attenuated to what's really going on in the classroom. And everything's different since COVID, by the way, even in a place like Palo Alto, where there's a lot of parental engagement. There's lots of funding for this and that. And yet emotions are really someone here on the panel says the socio-emotional part is really different now. I hope that answers that.
Julie?
So, I do understand that huge amount of work that those teacher preparation performance assessments, how much the work they are for these working teachers and these working professionals as they train. And I know it a lot more firsthand because so many people used a waiver from their teacher preparation to put off those assessments and are now trying to do them during induction. And that has really been hugely burdensome. And so I know induction programs that I work with in LA County and across the state are working hard to support those teachers and trying to take what they're doing in induction and tie it to those performance assessments so that they're not doubling up, that it's actually classroom based. We're working hard at that. Your original question was about what can the state do to help make this process easier. And I have to say, it is not consistent across the state that all teachers have access to induction at no cost to them. It's not. It used to be, I've been doing this a long time, and it used to be that when you got hired, you got support from a mentor from your very first 2 years at no cost to you because there was state funding available with that. When LCFF came into place, then a lot of districts were able to use their funding for other things and chose not to cover the cost of induction for those teachers. So the result was, for many districts, is to charge the teachers, right? Or to completely get rid of induction and let the teachers figure out how to get induction and clear their credential, and often go to very expensive university or county office programs, plus trying to do the work that they're doing in the classroom. And so it truly can't be classroom-based or district-based support most of the time because they're getting their induction from someplace else. Also, these teachers are coming in with huge student loans, and they cannot afford to make those loan payments and pay for the credentials. So many of them, what they do is they put it off because they've already got enough expenses. They're already paying their student loans. So they wait because they have 5 years to clear their credential. So in those first 2 years, they don't have support. They don't have a mentor working with them because they don't want to have to pay for this. They're putting it off, and they're not getting the support they need. And perhaps, they're burning out more quickly because there isn't that system of support. So what the state could do is pretty easily put into the LCAP priorities that induction be a part of what districts need to provide. They have the funding, they have the educator effectiveness block grant, but currently there is no requirement for the state, even though it's suggested, to use that money for induction, whether to provide induction in their own district or to pay for them to go to a neighboring program. But that would take one burden off of the teachers and allow them to have support right away.
Thank you so much for saying that, Julie. I think induction is not talked about enough as something that is like a really great answer for a lot of these problems. And I know in my district, you're not even allowed to do your induction your first year of teaching. They don't let you. They make you wait so that they maybe don't pay for it if they decide not to keep you, right? But that structure of support is not there for first year teachers, which is really harmful. The other thing I wanted to say just quickly is that in the wake of conversations around teacher shortage in general, which we know we're in right now, that's why we're all subbing during our prep periods, is the conversation around programming like Teach for America, right? Or options for intern credentials. And I think I get really fearful that we're going to lean on kind of like fast track options to solve the teacher shortage, rather than thinking about what long-term investments can we make that might be a little more work up front, like building strong induction programs, like offering teacher residencies for first-year teachers instead of hiring brand new teachers or putting teachers on intern credentials that haven't even finished any teacher prep program. And so I was talking to a colleague yesterday about just how I wish that we had in a residency program here. I'm technically a mentor for a colleague that is on an intern credential, but in full honesty, I've only seen her teach twice. It's like the structure in place to clear that credential is not, I don't think, strong enough for me to like have the supports to know what I need to offer her. They just like randomly assign anyone who wants to be a mentor to do it. And to me, I feel like she's not getting what she needs as a first year teacher on an intern credential. And so aside from induction, I really hope that the state takes a closer look at teacher residencies and encourages more districts to adopt something like that for brand new teachers.
So teachers who complete a residency program generally stay in profession longer or don't leave at an early time. So Gabriel, can you tell us about your residency program and if that helped you to become a good teacher?
The residency program, I started in 2019, and that's the kind of pre-COVID year. And this is a second career for me. So I came in with these rose-colored glasses on, but I was just super positive and so happy to be there. I had support from my program, and in the residency part of it, I felt like I had a lot of supports in place, but they weren't quite. They just were not quite, they didn't quite speak to the moment of my placement, and so there was just this big, huge gap, like what's really going on in the classroom was just so different than what was going on in HR behind the scenes as far as how they had things structured, and then the curriculum from the teacher program. All of those things were just sort of disjointed. There was but I got through. I successfully passed my teacher prep program at Mills and the first year of teaching. So I guess that's the big answer, is that I made it through, but it was not easy. And then I still have the TPA hanging over my head.
So, Julie, you talked about the importance of induction. I know I've seen different induction programs, and they vary greatly from district to district. Can you talk about what a high quality induction program should look like?
Absolutely. And we have many amazing induction programs across the state. I've had the privilege to be able to go and visit many of them, but it isn't consistent yet. It isn't. Over time, induction has evolved and should evolve from a paperwork-driven program to a mentor-based program. I've worked with induction and seen, that transformation and that how it's evolved over time. And what I've heard from the teachers in my program is that no one ever says after 2 years, if only there'd been more paperwork. What they do say is, I wish I'd had more time with my mentor, right? Above all, that mentor support, that mentor time, that consistent meeting that Jenna talked about, and that balance of what we like to call just-in-time support, which is support for whatever you need, right? Especially in that first semester of that first year, particularly for special ed teachers, because there are so many things about their legal requirements, about running IEP meetings and learning all the ins and outs, working with paraeducators. But general ed, same thing, trying to figure out your curriculum, trying to figure out the planning. And you need somebody by your side, right? You need somebody who is going to work with you on those things that you need most. You also are going to need a skilled and trained mentor to help you focus your learning, because new teachers are like, I got to do this, I need to learn this. But the more that they focus on a particular area that's going to be of most help to them, that's what they really need based on what their students need, based on what's actually happening in the classroom. Like Gabrielle said, you don't want that disconnect. You don't want to be working on something and have something else happening in your classroom. You want to have that support right where you need it, and get new strategies and tools from the experts in the districts, from other candidates to be able to collaborate with and have those peer conversations. For example, I have a number of preschool mod severe special ed teachers. There's a very specific context, and they are usually the only one teaching at their site. And so we've created a group to meet together from the different districts in my consortium to talk together about issues that have come up and things that they've done and share ideas. And so collaboration's a really big part of that as well. And you want to make sure that teacher is supported, but you're also an advocate for that teacher to not be overburdened, so that administrators understand they need that time. They need those first 2 years, and the administrator's role is key. They can't just say, "Oh, the mentor's taking care of it." They're just going to take care of it, and I don't have to worry about that new teacher. No, they're a wonderful guide for support in a non-evaluative way. They can absolutely guide that teacher and that mentor to some resources, to some professional development, to observe exemplary teachers in areas that they need it most, and to make sure that they're checking in. And that's really what makes a quality induction program. That's what's going to keep a teacher there, because they are supported by the entire system, and that they have that regular support. When an induction program is not effective is when a teacher feels like, okay, I have a mentor, but now I have all this paperwork I've got to do. That shouldn't happen still. That shouldn't be happening. It should be, any kind of documentation, because there needs to be some documentation based on the individual learning plan for their credentialing work, it should be done collaboratively, and it should really just reflect the conversation that's happening.
Thank you, Julie. Tommy?
Yeah, I would love to underscore what Julie said about school administrators. The school site leadership support has been shown to have very meaningful impact on teacher retention. Surveys do show that teachers who feel more supported by their site leaders are twice as likely to stay in the profession as compared to those who feel unsupported. And that requires both accountability and capacity building. And what I heard in what Julie said is school site administrators also need to be coached up. They need to learn how to be mentors, how to give supportive feedback to teachers. This is like the work New Teacher Center does. Like, we coach up mentors. That's our secret power. And so in Clint Independent School District, which is in Texas and in the El Paso area, we work with this school district to create professional learning sessions that train up both mentors and school site leaders in the same tools for coaching. So there's coherence with mentors and school administrators, so they're using common language. We wanted to make coaches of all educators. And the effect was ultimately to change mindsets about coaching, integrating it into the entire ecosystem of the school system. And school districts need to make sure this is a priority by building the capacity of administrators, but also providing data to school administrators. So school administrators know where their teachers are at in terms of their process of getting fully credentialed. You've got to have a tiered system of support for teachers like you do for children.
And just to add one thing onto that, one change in credentialing is that administrators now need to do induction to clear the credential. And so they have a better understanding of what that inquiry-based system's about and what kind of support is needed. Absolutely. And I think that as long as induction is a non-evaluative system and that administrators clearly understand that line between support for the growth of that new teacher, while also preserving that confidential relationship with the mentor so they feel safe talking with the mentor about anything and being vulnerable as well. So it's, I think Tommy's exactly right. Those administrators need to know how to wear those two different hats, how to give that support and keeping evaluation separate, because induction is purely a support system. It is not to be used for evaluation.
So, John, you're a master teacher and have mentored young teachers. Can you give us an example of how you've helped a young teacher to be successful?
I can. I want to, before it falls out of my head, I wanted to add to the importance of admin support that Tommy had mentioned. Not really a data point, but more of an anecdote. In my career, I've worked with quite a few admins, and I've definitely noticed a difference in our ability to retain new teachers versus high turnover, being very much correlated to the strength, the empathy, and the team building atmosphere, the community of the faculty, the community feel among the faculty that is encouraged and engendered by our administration. And when that is strong, we have new teachers come in and they stick. And when our administration hasn't created that culture, is actually almost thwarted that culture, then our ability to retain even great new teachers has been not as good. But back to your question, when I was first asked to be a master teacher about 20 years ago, I was a little hesitant because of my experience as a new teacher. And then I realized, okay, well, I can turn it around and basically do the things for my student teacher and then new hires as well that I wish had been done when I was new. And for me, it's been providing the lessons up front, making sure that the student teacher knows that if they want to create their own lesson plans, if they want to, reinvent the wheel, knock yourself out, that you can also take anything and everything that I have and the rest of our department has. You have access to all of it. You're here to get a feel for teaching. You know the content. So go ahead and use our content and the way we have it laid out. You can personalize later, but the hardest part of those first couple of years is managing the workload and figuring out how are you going to create the culture of the classroom that suits your personality and connect with the kids. And that's what I encourage my student teachers to focus on. And invest their energy in that, and not to burn as many matches in getting their curriculum written and making PowerPoints and devising labs. It's like we've got all that. You can do that when you feel more comfortable in your classroom, but let's focus on the part that is likely going to cause you the most stress and anxiety, and that's classroom management and connecting with the kids.
So we're going to take this a little different direction. Typically, teachers work more than 50 hours a week because schools usually don't offer much time for grading and lesson preparation. How do you think that impacts teacher retention?
My short answer is a lot. I think it plays a really big role. I teach high school, so I teach 5 periods a day, and then I have 1 prep period. But right now I have 4 different classes that I have to prep for in that 1 prep period. And amidst those, I'm also co-teaching. So during that prep time, I also have to plan with my special ed teacher who I share the space with and share some of my classes with. And so I get 1 55-minute period, and on a block day, I don't even get that period to do all of those things. And so it is not a sustainable system at all. And that is why a lot of teachers then ultimately end up doing time or work outside of the classroom, because there just isn't enough time in the day and not enough offerings for taking a day off to catch up on grading, especially with the sub shortage right now. There's a very clear pressure to not do that, to not take time if you need to catch up. And so I think that it plays a really big role in the burnout that teachers are feeling because there is just not enough time in the day and not enough offerings for teachers to feel like they can be paid for the time that they're spending outside of the classroom to do really critical work. I know in some instances, for example, with my co-teacher, because we have that special co-teaching relationship, we are offered up to 12 hours per school year of like hourly pay to meet beyond the class time. And I think that we like cashed out those 12 hours within the first month of school because I just met her and we were doing all of this initial planning and coordinating. So even then, those offers just don't feel like quite enough. And so I don't know if I have an answer, but I think the answer to your question is that it plays a really, really big role in whether or not teachers feel like they can handle this, whether or not they feel like it's sustainable.
Hey, John?
Yeah, to add to Jenna, it's time. And what was also being discussed by Julie, talking about all of the demands during induction and how beneficial it is to observe other teachers, to be observed, to meet with other faculty members, and to all of that requires time. And, do I have an answer? No. Would an ideal system be for new teachers that are hired as full contract employees to not teach a full schedule, to have an extra prep period? And that extra prep period is, yes, they have their prep period that every other teacher has, but they have an additional prep period because, hey, you're new. This is overwhelming. You've got to find you've got to find your land legs and get comfortable with this profession that you've chosen. And it takes a while to find what that's going to look like in your classroom that you're going to run. And it helps if you can go and observe other teachers in your subject area, in other subject areas, meet with those special ed teachers, talk about strategies that other teachers have employed. And that takes time. And freeing those teachers up. One of the questions that came up in the Q&A sidebar, I actually responded that our district has begun this year giving a release period to one effectively mentor teacher in our departments so that they can act as instructional coaches for the new teachers and, in fact, all teachers, but basically go around and observe and talk and help out. And it's really just about having that additional time to be able to support one another. And those new teachers really need that support. And they need to learn what other teachers are doing. And if they're teaching a full load and trying to make themselves seen among the student body by going to dances and sporting events and everything, they just don't have the time to do all of the things that need to be done, grading and lesson planning and all that. And if they could ease into the profession in that way by having an extra prep period, and it's like, hey, that's what we do for our new teachers because we want them to stay. And we want them to feel comfortable working in and not go through those hellish first couple of years that, I was told, well, that's just the way it is. Deal with it, sink or swim, and you survive and it'll get easier from here. But it's like, should it be that hard to begin with? No, it shouldn't be. It's not. That's why we're losing those teachers early on, many of whom could have been phenomenal and probably were phenomenal and just threw up their hands and said, I've had enough.
We want to try to squeeze in a few. Oh, sorry. And Julie, we'll get to you as well. I want to squeeze in a few questions from the audience. And Julie, I think it builds on what we're already talking about. But a question from the audience, if anyone on the panel can answer how their district or how districts are using funds from the Educator Effectiveness Grant, how they're applying that for the new teachers.
One of the things that I've seen districts do, first of all, they pay for induction. The minute teachers are hired, the credential analysts get them started with the induction program, and we get them assigned a mentor within 30 days. So they have someone immediately starting with getting the preparation for the class, all of that. So they get support right away. Also giving that targeted professional development, social emotional support, serious behavior issues. So districts really listening to teachers and finding out what they need and using those funds to really focus that support for those teachers. That's incredibly helpful. Also, paying mentor stipends that really actually give them some compensation for their time. That's really important, that those mentors are really one of the kind of people you want to clone, right? You want those most supportive people. And the problem is districts often overwork those people who are chosen to be mentors. So giving those mentors the space and the time, but also elevating that role of mentor so that it's not somebody who's just gotten their arm twisted to go, all right, I'll help that teacher. It needs to be someone that the district's educators aspire to be. And so districts can use their funding for that as well. And also, just to piggyback on what John was saying, districts really have to be committed to stop giving those new teachers the hardest positions, the 4 preps, the extra assignment, the 5 preps, right? Or, I saw recently a district had a listing for somebody had 2 different credentials, 2 subject areas, and could coach rugby. I'm like, well, come on, what are you asking of these people? It's really important that it be a district commitment to support their new teachers and put that money towards that so that they are able to have those first 2 years to get their feet under them, to get effective teaching habits, and then maybe take on some extra responsibilities. It's a long-term investment.
Tommy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would love to give an example from actually Los Angeles, LAUSD. They've hired 1,000 new teachers in the last 2 years. And what they've done is they're providing extra professional development to these teachers, paying them for those 20 hours of professional development, and on top of them, giving them a stipend. And the goal is to give them $5,000 worth of stipend over the course of the next couple of years. And the topics are very focused on what teachers are asking for. And number one, wellness and health, self-care is the number one topic, but also topics such as how do you grade in an equitable way? How do I plan for individual needs of students, especially when I'm working with classrooms that are very diverse? How do I look at data? So very practical things, but topics that teachers are surfacing.
One other question from the audience. We have some university-based teacher educators in the audience, and they ask, what can they do or not do for candidates prior to that first year?
One of the things that I see that teachers struggle with is managing their own time and priorities. Right? We kind of tell them, hey, don't forget your self-care, but there's no time for self-care, right? They're staying late, they're doing all that. They don't really get much training in teacher preparation on how to manage their time and to be able to have some extra time in the day or to create priorities. It feels a little bit like you're thrown in the deep end and you got to figure it out your own way. Rather than have some guidance going in on the practical aspects of how to plan, how to not just getting everything in, but how to use your day as wisely as possible. What's a priority? What needs to be graded? What can just be reviewed as formative assessments? That kind of guidance, that practical guidance, I think would be really helpful for teachers going into the profession.
And I would also add just more realistic conversation. Like I spent a lot of time learning and talking about theory, educational theory and pedagogical approaches. And all of that sounds really great. But when I got into the classroom, like Julie's saying, those really practical daily things didn't feel like I had an opportunity to practice them. And so I think people who are working in teacher prep programs, like build in time for your students to bring in the lessons that they're using with their mentor teacher and look them over, right? Or build in time for them to practice grading assignments that their mentor teacher has passed on to them, right? Like that time to look at what they're actually doing in their classroom, and less time to delve into theory and pedagogy, because in all realness, like I was not ready to grasp all of that stuff quite yet. It's about, I think, John, you said this earlier, like, we don't need to worry too much about all of that curriculum right up front in a perfect world, right? Somebody can have something to share with you. It's about managing your classroom, building strong relationships with your students, understanding how to build culture, how to teach with compassion in a way that, theory doesn't necessarily help you figure out.
Tommy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think there's really great opportunity right now for more coherence making to happen between schools of ed and districts to create pipelines where teachers from a particular school of ed are going to a particular district, and you can start creating that coherence in terms of professional development early on. And so you're not seeing this sort of disconnect. I had that sort of experience where, look, what I was learning in teacher ed was so different from the type of professional development I was getting when I was a district teacher. It's just, so it happens because it's just, there isn't those pipelines created and there isn't enough conversation going on between districts and schools of ed. I think there's great opportunity because every district needs teachers right now.
So the most current California Teacher Supply Report shows that enrollment in teacher preparation programs is down again after 7 years of increases. So what can the state do to encourage people to become teachers? Anybody?
I think someone mentioned this earlier, but like funding opportunities for teacher prep, right? Help us pay for that. I think that state can support opportunities to help new teachers find housing in the communities that they're teaching in. Someone else mentioned like living at home. Like I had to live at home the first few years of teaching in order to gain, some sort of structure. And then lastly, I'll say loan forgiveness for teachers. It is a very specific group of teachers who qualify for certain loan forgiveness, and it leaves out a lot of other teachers who do not fit that. And I think we're all doing really important work, and it feels strange to only offer that to some.
I would have to completely agree with that. I think the incentives would largely have to be financial, whether it's providing housing at a lower rate somehow. And I'm in coastal Orange County, and our new teachers cannot afford, even if they're coming in with a master's degree, they cannot afford the going rate of rent for a 1-bedroom apartment within 15 miles of our school district. And it's shameful. And student loan forgiveness, on whatever incentives need to be made. And our state has a budget surplus, do they not? Let's have those legislators put their money where their mouths are. And actually, if they want more teachers, show it.
A question from the panel. Sorry, go ahead, please.
One quick thing. There is money available for teachers for training. It is not easily accessible. It is not clear how to get that. I've had to help some prospective teachers negotiate that, and it's not that easy. And I'm within the educational system. So that has to be clearer, and it has to be made to more communities, right? Where they understand, okay, this is going to help me pay. And also the student teaching system, where you work basically for free, is really not something most people, especially those with families, can possibly afford. And so, amending that system as well, I think would be hugely helpful in recruiting teachers.
Building on what Jenna and John and
I agree with that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I totally
Gabriel.
agree with the working for free part. Like, who does that? Like student athletes at the college level, now they're talking about it. Political assistants in Sacramento, they're really upset about doing a free internship over the summer. It can just make you or break you. These microaggressions, that come in these financial burdens, and live in one of the most expensive areas of the country. And it's just a lot. It's just a lot. So, yeah.
Well, that's exactly the question I was going to raise and surface from the audience, which is for any of the panelists, can you speak to any initiatives in your districts or in districts that you're aware of that do address affordable housing for teachers?
I don't think there's an active initiative, but my district literally sent out a survey about this, maybe not even a week ago, asking teachers if they would support a district investment in some sort of housing initiative. They gave a bunch of different options. And that was the first that I've ever heard of it. And it's kind of been the talk of the town that, like, oh my gosh, they're finally listening to this thing that we've all said is such a big barrier. Living in the Bay Area, particularly. And so nothing in place, but it does seem to be a conversation that more districts are having, I think, which is a step in the right direction.
Tommy?
Jenna, not too far from where you are at in Daly City, Jefferson Union High School District just recently offered housing stipends. And I know Oakland is exploring it, LA is exploring it. In the Ed Week survey I talked about at the very beginning of this panel, they also asked specifically how important this was. And this is where there was actually the greatest differentiation between teachers of color and non-teachers of color. Teachers of color, 70% of them identify housing stipends as being very important for them in entering the teaching profession. And actually, a little bit behind is 60% of teachers of color identified mentorship actually as being a very important consideration. So mentorship, housing, very high up on that list.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not surprised that we are already at the hour. It has flown by. I want to thank everyone on the panel for your time, for your insight, for just your candid answers to the many questions that have surfaced from the audience. So thank you to the audience for surfacing such thoughtful questions. Thanks again to the Gates Foundation for making today's roundtable possible. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everyone.